We take 29-year-old woman Aminat Lawal, who has been arraigned before an Ikorodu Chief Magistrates Court for allegedly beating her 12-year-old son, causing him serious injury. According to police prosecutor ASP Aminu Isaac, the incident occurred around 2 a.m. on October 29 at Kokoroabu Street, Ikorodu, where the woman reportedly assaulted her child, resulting in a dislocated right hand. The offense is said violates Section 135 of the Lagos State Criminal Code of 2015, which prohibits acts of indecent treatment or physical abuse of minors. Lawal pleaded not guilty to the charge. Chief Magistrate B.A. Sonuga granted her bail in the sum of 500,000 naira with two sureties in like sum. The case has now been adjourned until December 4th for mention. Kolawole, where do we draw the line between discipline and abuse in parenting? Let's talk about it. What are your thoughts on this report?
Discipline is important. Training a child requires discipline, but there's a difference between discipline and excess discipline, which amounts to abuse or brutalization, if I may use that word. Because there are lots of ways to go about these things, and when disciplining a child, like the Bible says, by the word, you have to be careful, right? You do not just beat up a child without being conscious of what you're doing, which is why I think I talked about this on the show recently. Before you even discipline a child, or after you discipline a child the right way, you are supposed to then ensure that there is a pre or post discussion of why you had to discipline the child. You can have this discussion with the child before or after the discipline. And like I said, you have to be conscious of how you're beating your child. For example, if you're using a cane, a cane is a pointy object. You have to be ensure that it doesn't go close to the kid's eye. You can beat on the palm, and I'm not here to teach people how to beat basically, but just being careful goes a long way. And some people, like I always say on the show, some people are not supposed to be parents. Talk less of I say some people are not supposed to be married. Some are not even supposed to be parents, because being married is one thing. Then when a kid comes into play, the dynamics changes. Because of course there are times when you have to discipline a child. I mean, you can take that out of a child. Basically, you want the child to turn out right, but you have to do it the right way.
Right.
And there are some parents out there that are not psychologically stable. In terms of some have anger management issues. You see some people just in the process of disciplining a child, they either just hit the child too aggressively or push the child to the wall, that sort of thing. That is not discipline, if you ask me. That is abuse. That is brutalization. And I understand that. I mean, I've had this discussion with learned people, and so I would say sometimes parents are also going through a lot. And when a kid does something, the aggression, it happens in a split second. I understand these things can happen, but I always tell people, before you even take action about things, try to take a deep breath. Try to, think about what you want to do before you do it. Some might think it's impossible, but that's where self-control comes in, right? If you discipline a child without self-control, you will turn out, you will completely brutalize and abuse that child. So when you discipline, you need to include self-control into it. That's when it becomes, it becomes legal, if I may use that word.
Right. Now, I mean, you've gone the whole 9 miles with this analysis and talking about the right and the wrong way, to discipline a child. I want to point something to your reference. Now, first of all, I want you to, tell me if you think there is a right way. What level will you say is a right way of discipline? Especially when you look at the holistic picture of what the world has become with quote and unquote gentle parenting, where people say they are setting other mechanisms to discipline a child without actually, lifting up the rod. I usually used to have a guest on the show that would say when the Bible says the rod, it did not mean slap. It meant the rod. The rod is actually what it is, an actual rod, right? Now, in reference to that statement usually made by, by that guest, I want to point you to say, at what point do you say that this punishment for this particular action deserves, you know, a right punishment or a right punishment? How do you weigh it? And in nuance of that, as an adult, as a man, do you punish yourself when you err? When you make mistakes, do you punish yourself by flogging or by, self-punishment? Do you give yourself some form of self-punishment that you think that, this sort of punishments to tame, mold, and embolden children must be delivered through a spank or some form of punishment?
I would say that, first, let me start from the last question. As adults, we're all kids once, right? We all, at least most of us in this part of the world, you and I can attest that discipline is like, it's a norm. I'm sure there are some families where, it's not that serious. Those that grew up, permit me to say, with silver spoons and all of that. But if you grow up in a household where your parents had to work hard for their money, had to pay the school fees, there's no way there'll be no discipline in the household, because you cannot go and waste their money, like my parents used to say then, right? So for us as adults now, we have attained a level of selflessness. I feel like whenever we make mistakes, some people tend to critique themselves, and then our psyche, our psychological state allows us to think inwardly and critique ourselves more, which I can call that a type of discipline. It's not for everybody, right? But in type of way, I mean, you can't then begin to flog yourself or beat up yourself because of that, right? But for kids growing up, kids have a developing brain. Most times, some kids find it hard to understand. Not really understand. Some kids do the wrong things, even when they know it's wrong.
Okay.
Right? Adults do that as well, but like I said, we have grown to the level of selflessness, free will like creatures. But as a kid, in a household, my dad then would say, as long as you're in my house, right, you are supposed to abide by some rules, which in families, I mean, it's common in families. I mean, there are some families, oh, you're not supposed to do this thing. That's how, daddy said you should do it, or that's how mommy said you should do it. And when you go against that, I mean, sometimes you get a beating for it, right? And if you look at that at a broader scale, that just goes to even show you how the society works. So I feel like as kids, it's a way of letting you know that this is how life works, right? When you do some things that are against the rule of a particular space that you find yourself in, you could face some disciplinary actions for your action, right? So as kids, I think you cannot take out the word. I mean, there are some kids that are easy to train. Like, I mean, the Bible says, train up the child in the way he should go and all of that. Right? There are some kids that are easy to train. They are, calm, meek. They try to be intentional about what they are doing and your instructions growing up.
Right.
Kids are different. There are some that are, probably to say, a bit stubborn. Right, they want to have their way at all times and all of that. And in such cases, you might have to, rely on the rod a bit. Now, gentle parenting, like you mentioned, is not wrong. I see a lot of people doing it online and whatnot. That is also a way of parenting, right? That does not mean it has to take out the rod completely, especially depending on, depending on what the kid's action. Right, depending on the action, the reaction is supposed to be proportional. For example, if you say, just citing an example, maybe you tell a kid to always sweep the house, maybe before you get back from work, and today kid did not do that. You could talk to the kid, oh, but I told you to always sweep the house before I get back from work, right? Then you give a warning. The next day, he does the same thing. You probably raise your voice a bit. This is wrong for you to do. I've given you an instruction to always sweep the house before I get back. The third day, right, he does the same thing. And then maybe you're probably raising your voice at the kid and starts murmuring and all of that. I mean, at that point in time, you could say that is already disrespect, because, I mean, once could be a mistake, twice, okay, you could allow it. But 3 times, for me, in my books, I mean, doing it the third time means it's intentional and it's complete disrespect. Then you could say, oh, you deserve a beating for this, grab your cane or whatnot. And in as much as that, this is an example, by the way.
Right.
You know, there are things out there that could be much more intense. In as much as you want to discipline the child, you have to be careful, right? Because now you are not the idea of that's why most times I don't usually say people should just use anything you have around. You probably have something, maybe a cane. Back then, there's this just for reference, but people will say kuboku. So my dad used to hang it on the wall just to hang, you know, to bring that fear into us. You know, you'd be like, oh, if I grab this kuboko for you, that idea alone just makes everybody to sit upright and abide by the rules and instruction, right? So when you are disciplining a child, then you have to be conscious of the discipline. At that stage, you don't, no matter what stress you have gone throughout the day and all that, you don't just pour out all that aggression on the child, no matter what. You have to control yourself and ensure that the level at which you are disciplining the child is moderate. Then afterwards, you let it end. You don't just beat up a child. I mean, this report talks about dislocating the child's arm. I mean,
right.
That's too much, right? Sometimes you don't even have to rely on just beating. There are punishments. There are some days growing up, my mom, because she didn't like beating, she would give us a punishment. And then, to be honest, even right now, I would say punishments kind of go a longer way if you ask me, because if you, for example, if you tell a kid to pick pin, back then I used to hate this punishment, this pick pin punishment, because for this you still keep feeling the pain
right.
in your back and your legs. So you could go that route. I mean, there's hardly anything that could go wrong with punishment. I mean, you don't. Some people are crazy out there. I'm not saying go and bring out the punishment from a torture book and all that, but you know, kneeling down, you know, basic punishments for a while, just to make sure that kid knows that this is why you like I said earlier, you let them know why they are doing that punishment.
Right.
You know why I gave you this punishment. You know, let them know so that such occurrences will not happen again, basically. But going ahead to beat up a child, some will go ahead as grabbing iron or pepper, put on a wound, dislocating a child, that's just outright abuse if you ask me.